Okay, so this part I'm going to talk about the dispute over the amendment of surrender of fugitive offenders ordinance. What's still, if you read news, can still see what's going on lively these days. So the march, the demonstrations now going on in Hong Kong. So the whole thing actually started, or the background of the whole debate is actually about a gentleman Hong Kong person, permanent resident, who went to Taiwan with his girlfriend for a holiday, and he murdered his girlfriend in Taiwan, and then escaped Taiwan, coming back to Hong Kong. Okay. But so the issue is whether the gentleman should be surrendered to Taiwan for trial. Because in Hong Kong, he was indicted actually under different crime for unlawful use of computer. Okay. But that would only keep him in jail most likely up to October this year. Okay. That crime is not murder. So for the proper murder trial, because of evidence or etc., he should be extradited to Taiwan for trial. So that's the whole debate, and that has led our chief executive decided to amend the surrender of fugitive offenders ordinance and another mutual assistance ordinance. Okay, to amend those two ordinances is so that he can be surrendered to Taiwan for trial, okay, in timely, because they have to rush through the legislation before October, before the suspect would be released from jail. So that was the whole intention. Okay, and so the government have made some proposals. Essentially, its proposal is because currently Hong Kong has extradition agreement with some countries. Okay, those are based on the agreements. Okay, you reach an agreement with another jurisdiction, and then you follow the surrender of fugitive offenders ordinance. Then the people can be surrendered. Okay, so that's a permanent agreement, that sort of arrangement. But there is no once-off or case-by-case surrender if there is no agreement exists between Hong Kong and another jurisdiction. So, for example, between Hong Kong and Taiwan, Hong Kong and mainland China, actually the fugitive could not be surrendered either to Taiwan or to mainland China. So that was the situation, and the government's proposal is actually to amend the existing legislation or ordinances so that individuals, those suspects, could be surrendered to another jurisdiction which has no permanent agreement with Hong Kong for trial. So on a case-by-case basis. So that was the whole intention. The purpose is to solve the particular issue, to surrender the gentleman to Taiwan. But if this amendment is adopted or passed by the Legislative Council, then a fugitive can surrender to all the other jurisdictions with which Hong Kong has no agreement with, including mainland China. So that's the intention. And if you look at the government's proposal, initially they wanted to apply it to those crimes set out in the ordinance, but they're limited to 37 specific crimes listed there. And also they limited the surrender to those crimes which will attract 3 years imprisonment. Okay. The normal international practice is for 1 year imprisonment. Okay. So the limit increased to 3 years. Okay. So actually to more serious crimes. And also, if you look at the government's proposal, it stated very clearly all those protection of fundamental human rights will be there. okay, will be there. In other words, for example, any rights enjoyed under the Bill of Rights Ordinance, which is verbatim, you can say, a copying of the ICCPR in Hong Kong. Okay, that's local legislation. All those fundamental rights will be enjoyed by people. Okay, and the suspects, even through the surrender process, he can, if he's not happy, he can apply for a judicial review of government's decision. So the judicial protection is also there. So that's the proposal. But the government later, actually, after the government's proposal is out, it has attracted a lot of opposition, okay, against it. And initially, if you look at the response, and mainly from certain sectors, the opposition, okay, not from the general public, from certain sectors. For example, if you look at the Bar Association so far has issued 3 statements against the extradition, particularly to mainland China, okay, to mainland China. Because government's view is they are going to filling a loophole in existing legislation. And Bar Council argued that it's not a loophole. Okay? It was intentional because there was no trust, okay, between Hong Kong and mainland China about the extradition. So there are a lot of disputes there. But essentially, technically, they have made certain comments about the problem of the government's proposal. Here I just list a few. One is how to start the whole process, okay, of the extradition. And the proposal was you need the certificate of the chief executive to start, okay, and without going through the sort of subsidiary legislation process. And the second is the supervision by the Legislative Council, because previously you have some monitoring by the Legislative Council, but after the new amendment, then it wouldn't go through the Legislative Council. Okay? Just the chief executive will decide, then you go through the judiciary will have a sort of monitoring over it, or supervision. So the legislature's monitoring will be removed. Okay. So that's the thing. But then, when it's out, another concern actually, major concern, was from the business sector. Because many businessmen in Hong Kong, the early days they did business in mainland China, whereas they say a bit of corruption here or making violation of taxation law was a sort of routine practice for many of them. So they were concerned that they would be caught by the Chinese criminal law. And then they would fall into this arrangement, and then they could be extradited or surrendered to mainland China for actual criminal trial. So that's their concern. That's why they ask for the increasement of the seriousness of the crimes to be covered under the case-by-case arrangement from 3 years to 7 years. Government actually agreed to it. But more gradually, actually, general public get concerned about the surrender. Because people are saying, actually inaccurately, that, for example, if you go to the June the 4th, every year Hong Kong will have a big party there, and on the June the 4th. And the people are saying, this year will be the last year you can attend. If you go next year, you will be surrendered to mainland China. So that kind of fear was stirred up, and because ordinary people, they don't read the bill at all. So if that's the case, we should be concerned, right? We should be stand up and against it. So a lot of that kind of concern was raised. But if you look at and also of course international society have the expressed the concern about it. And particularly one thing is about the Huawei's, the Meng Wanzhou event happened in Canada. That has led actually many foreign countries worry that if the amendment to the bill, to the two ordinances, would be adopted, those foreigners who pass through Hong Kong might be caught and be surrendered to mainland China. Okay, just like Meng Wanzhou was caught in Canada and could be surrendered to the United States. So people worried about that. So that's one of the main reasons, in my view, the other foreign countries got concerned about it. Of course, the argument they put forward is about Hong Kong, the restriction for Hong Kong people's freedom. Okay. So that's the dispute. But the arguments in support here, I mentioned a few, is to fill in a loophole to avoid Hong Kong to be the paradise for fugitives. Because according to the statistics or figures given by mainland China, there are about 200 corrupted officials or people from mainland China who are now hiding in Hong Kong. But they could not be surrendered back to mainland China for trial. Okay, nothing could be done towards that. Okay, and Canadian example I've given. Okay, and the Hong Kong government actually said very clearly that political offenders won't be surrendered to mainland China. Okay, in the bill, and also no people will be surrendered based on sort of religious reasons. Okay, so those protections are there. And the court and the government, particularly the court, can conduct supervision over any extradition request. Okay. But then, you may say, if those protections are there, why people are still concerned? Okay. Why are they concerned? Whether their concerns have some justifications behind. I will give you a couple of examples in a minute. But if you look at how the event has evolved over the amendment to the two ordinances, you will see the development is very interesting. The bar has issued its views basically against it. The Law Society's position paper came out very late. Okay? It's a mixed view. Most part of it is saying, yes, it's fine, go ahead. But there are certain parts of it that says, no, it's not good. You need to be cautious. And then, if you look at the first demonstration against the amendment happening April 28th this year, only according to the government's statistics, around 23,000 participants. But the organizer says there were 130,000 people there. And after that, I gave a presentation in mainland China about it. At that time, I said, it's likely the amendment will be passed by the Legislative Council. But on one condition or proviso is that it depends on later how many people will go on street for demonstration. If over 500,000 will go on street, what happened in 2003 might happen again. That is, the bill will be suspended. Okay. And later, if you look at what happened, obviously, we have more people on the streets, even according to the government. If you look at the two major demonstrations, the organizer said one has 1 million, the other has 2 millions. But even if you, according to the government's statistics, they say on the 16th of June, at the peak time, there were over 300,000. But if you look at people will go and leave, okay? If you look at the whole number, definitely over 500,000. May not be to 2 million, but definitely over 500,000. So it will be more than the people on the streets in 2003. This time. Okay. And also if you look at what's happened so far, And it's worse than 2003 in the sense that it's become a routine practice. Now, every week, they will organize a sort of demonstration in one particular district. What exactly happened the last few days was in Xiating, and it caused quite a chaotic thing. And most likely the next week they're moving to another district, organize the same demonstration. Okay. So that has get the situation into Hong Kong into a big mess at the moment. How we will get out, I will come to say in a minute. But because I'm a legal scholar, so if we look at the issue rationally, are the proposed amendments good or bad? So here I give you some main concerns raised about the extradition between Hong Kong and China, mainland China, over the years, because Hong Kong and mainland China had been in the negotiation of an agreement for more than 2 decades. But it stopped somehow. In the early days after 1997, there was still discussion. But after about a decade, that discussion stopped. It stopped. So according to the documents submitted to the Legislative Council, so those are the main concerns raised or regarded as the obstacles for reaching agreement between Hong Kong and mainland China on surrender of fugitives. So double criminality, no extradition for death penalty in death penalty cases, and no extradition for political offenses. If you look at this, actually, in the first decade, Chinese scholars, when we had the discussion together about this, they're all against. They say, now it's one country. Hong Kong is part of China. If Hong Kong is a foreign country, we will agree with no extradition in case of death penalty. But now you're part of China. Why we should agree to that? They say no. And second, no extradition for political offenses. They say we don't have political offenses. Okay. There's no political offenses. So any crimes, it's against national security, so will be surrendered, should be surrendered. So those are the 2 main obstacles actually against the reaching of the agreements. But this time, Hong Kong government stated very clearly on those principles for the amendment. And central government didn't say no to it. Basically agreed. Okay. But the reason, of course, my guess is they thought it's just amendment of local legislation. It's not their business, it's a local legislation amendment. So they haven't, my guess is they have not done detailed research into it. If they have, they might disagree on this. Okay. And then the right against double jeopardy. That's also said, yes, it's in our law. Okay. A procedural issue over the sort of concurrent jurisdiction, that could be an issue there, even these days, but wouldn't be a big one. Okay? Habeas corpus protection is also stated very clearly. It will be there. Okay? And the procedure, it's a different size procedure thing. Okay? So if you look at actually the main obstacles, what originally were the main ones, now have all been agreed this time for the amendment. The protections are all there. Okay? But you may say, why people are still so worried about it? Okay? So the essential thing, actually, if you ask people, there are 2 points. One is lack of confidence. At the end of the day, they don't have the trust or confidence in the criminal justice system in mainland China. That's the main thing. If you go to ask them, if you read all the position papers. And the second is, if you go to ask people, they say, why you want to amend the ordinances? Most people in Hong Kong will tell you, it's the main purpose is to extradite people or surrender people from Hong Kong to mainland China, not to surrender that gentleman to Taiwan. So that's people's suspicion, okay, suspicion. Though from the sources where I obtained the information is central government has not given Hong Kong the instruction to amend the ordinance. The initiative came from the Hong Kong government itself. But the majority of the public in Hong Kong do not believe in that. And if you ask the international community, I guess majority of them don't believe in that. So that's the problem there for the current dispute. And if you look at the whole issue, I think Hong Kong government has made some mistakes, or there are some problems in its handling of the whole situation. So one problem I identify is the lack of governance skills. Okay? That is, its unwillingness to compromise. Okay? So they have the sort of elite people's mentality. They believe what they say is the best proposal. Okay? They've already considered the people's interests. Okay? So they don't want to compromise at all. I give you just one example. The protection of human rights. Certain people have raised the request that you include the protection of human rights into the amendment bill. And the government said, no need, because we have the Bill of Rights ordinance already. And all those fundamental rights are guaranteed, protected under the Bill of Rights ordinance, together with the basic law. So no need to include. So if people want it, and it won't affect you, why not? They want to include it so they feel more safe, even though it won't make any difference. But as a sort of governance skill, you can make that compromise. Won't affect your position at all. But the government said, no, we're not going to do it. Okay? And another problem was the extremely short period of consultation, 2 months. They gave 2 months. But the issue of no extradition has been there for more than 2 decades. Okay? So they expect to resolve the issue which has not been resolved for 2 decades just in a few months. Okay? So that made people even more suspicious. Why do you want to hurry? Okay? Why do you want to hurry? In a few months you want to amend the law. Okay? So if they give people the consultation, say we're going to consult for a year, okay? When the society reaches the consensus, then we'll amend the law. The situation will be quite different. Okay? Another example, a problem is lack of enough explanation. Here I give you 2 examples. Okay? To show those cases actually can be used by the government to argue, to explain, to give people confidence. One is the Causeway Bay bookseller, okay, Lin Rongji. And he said that, I'm very worried about the extradition agreement, the amendment of the ordinance, because he was afraid he would be surrendered to mainland China for trial. Okay? So he went to Taiwan to live. And the pan-democrats have used his example, say, look, he's worried, he's leaving Hong Kong, so you should also be worried as an ordinary citizen. And the government didn't say anything about it. That is actually a good example. Government can say, he would not be surrendered to mainland China for trial. Because what he did in Hong Kong was lawful. Nothing unlawful. So double criminality is the condition for surrender. If he has not infringed the law in Hong Kong, how could he be surrendered to mainland China? So that is a good example. Government can give people confidence. Okay? And another example is some financial analysts have written on papers saying that they are worried because one of their colleagues, who was also a financial analyst, Australia, he wrote something about Chinese state-owned enterprises and the corruption inside. And then he went to mainland China, to Shenzhen. He was actually arrested by police coming from Xinjiang. And he was taken from Shenzhen to Xinjiang for trial and was sentenced for a few months imprisonment because of what he wrote in Australia. And so those Hong Kong analysts, financial analysts say, oh, we should be worried about because he was taken. Right? If we write later on, if we write those comments, we might be taken again. We'll be surrendered to mainland China for trial. Again, that's a misunderstanding. Okay? Because whatever they've written outside mainland China, in Hong Kong, like the Australian analyst, what he wrote was lawful in Australia, also in Hong Kong was lawful. Then Hong Kong government definitely cannot surrender him to mainland China. Nobody will do that in Hong Kong. But if he comes to mainland or goes to mainland China, that's a different story. You went there yourself, right? You violate the law there. They apply their criminal law to you while you were in mainland China. So that's different from surrender of fugitive at all. So that's those kind of misunderstanding, plenty of them, okay, reported in the newspaper, but no clarification, no explanation from the government. So that has led to the people, you can say so many ordinary people surrounding me, including my relatives in Hong Kong. They say, we are very worried. There are doctors and others, architects. They say, we are worried. I say, what are you worrying about? Because the government have not explained, have not given people the confidence. So that's the sort of serious misunderstanding, or the problems happen. But after the calling off of the amendment, government, I think, also made some mistakes or have some problems. One is unwillingness to withdraw the bill. Because our chief executive has said formally, first, it's suspended. Okay? But there's like possibility, if it's suspension, possibility it will be revived later. But then a few days ago, she said, the bill is dead. It's dead. That's the word he used. And she's not going to restart it in this legislative session. But one major requirement from the organizers of the demonstration is formal withdrawal of the bill from the Legislative Council. So if she could already say it's dead, what's the difference to say, okay, I will formally withdraw? Same meaning, but for the safe face purpose, she doesn't want to touch that word, okay, that phrase. But politics is about compromise. It's not face issue, okay? You need to do that, but they're unwilling to do that, particularly she, okay? And also now another thing is, I think that's very unhealthy, is now the government is giving in 100% to the political pressure from the demonstration. Okay? Now it all look at the numbers. So long as the participants number exceeds certain figure, 500,000 definitely, then everything will stop. Okay? Everything will stop. Okay? And they have no plan about what they're going to do in the future. No long-term plan, including those mistakes or misunderstandings, whether to clarify. No such thing. Okay. So if you look at the whole thing, actually, if you analyze the whole issue rationally, the main problem is lack of trust, mutual trust between Hong Kong and mainland China, particularly Hong Kong people's trust in mainland Chinese governance. So that's the main problem. So I think both sides should do something to increase, to boost the mutual trust. Otherwise, the issue cannot be resolved. So for example, there are some proposals on the table from the pan-democrats, from the Bar Council. You just do one once-off deal with Taiwan to surrender the people to Taiwan for trial. Then you start say, okay, you want long-term arrangement, not short-term. Then we start consultation. Whenever we have the consensus, we will do it. Without consensus, we're not going to do it. Then you can give people confidence, okay? And another thing is, I think, if this time the case-by-case surrender arrangement can be passed, it's good for Hong Kong, okay? Good for Hong Kong. Because many of those conditions, mainland China did not agree. Now they are brought into the agreement already. So those agreements, once you have this spatial arrangement there, if you move on to the long-term arrangement, because now you've already agreed under the spatial arrangement, there will be no excuse for mainland China to say, no, I'm not going to agree under the formal agreement. Okay? Little chance there for mainland China to say that. So there will be a good opportunity to have a long-term arrangement in the foreseeable future. Okay? But because of this, the lack of, you can say, governance skills, the whole thing has brought to it's a stop. And I don't know how long. My personal guess is in the foreseeable future, maybe 5 to 7 years, the issue will not be raised before the LICO. So it's, from my perspective, it's really a pity that the government has not taken the opportunity properly and get it passed. And now the whole situation has deteriorated in Hong Kong. So I will stop here.